Welcome to Ground Up Growth, where we share entrepreneurial insights, business strategies, and personal growth lessons to help listeners build success from the ground up.
All right, welcome back to Ground Up Growth. This is episode 7. Today I have Parker Sullivan with Sullivan's Grocery here. He's one of the owners, and we're going to dive right into his story. Parker, thank you so much for coming on, man.
I'm excited to be here, and I think I have a good story to tell for you.
That's awesome. All right, so where you from, how old you are, and all that?
So I am 37. I grew up in Pearl, Mississippi, and got 2 kids. Live right here in Madison, and work at the Gluckstadt store the most, and it's pretty much home base for me now.
Married?
Married, yep. This summer will be 11 years. 11. So
you get married when you were 26, I guess?
26. My wife actually moved in with me, I think I was 22. So pretty much I feel like my whole adult life has been with her. So, she's definitely been there for me and, consistent person in my life. So.
Yeah, so she's seen a pretty good bit of your story. So
she's seen a lot of it, and through the good, the bad, the ugly, and
right.
She's definitely been there the whole time and been very supportive, and never really slowed us down any.
Yeah,
she never really said like, "Hey, we don't need to do this or do that." She just kind of really trusted the process of us trying to grow and everything, and just I guess let us have the runway to do so.
Right. Yeah, that's huge for sure. So I do not know Parker Sullivan. I've met him a couple of times, but I know nothing about your story, and that's what I'm so fired up about, is to unpack Sullivan's Grocery. So,
well, it's I was telling you that this is our 20th year in business. So we started in 2005. This summer will be 20 years. But really, my story starts before that. My dad has always been in the grocery business, and he and I are very similar in the way that, he's only had 2 jobs. I've only had 2 jobs my whole life. Okay. And it's been in the grocery business, and I did a short stint at Muskelly's Furniture. But he started working as a bag boy in a grocery store in Forest, Mississippi, and made his way to be a store manager by the time he was early 20s. And just that was his career path. And then, as he got older, my brother and I...
Did he go to college?
He did not go to college.
Okay. So he grew up in Forest?
He did. And straight into the grocery business. And then, my brother and I came along, and, every weekend he had to work in the grocery business 7 days a week. So he was working every weekend. So when it was his weekend to have us, we had to go to work with him. And store opens at 6 o'clock. So we were there. I remember being still dark outside with my brother, and even telling my dad as he's trying to check up the office and everything, like, hey, we're hungry. And he would send us over to the deli, like, y'all go over there and make donuts. And, OSHA would probably kill us for this, but we'd be standing on a milk crate flipping donuts or whatever. And, once the donuts were all done, they let us have one. And, that was growing up with my dad being, grocery store manager. So we'd be there all day. To keep busy, he'd give us tasks of work to do. We would be stocking the trucks or fronting shelves or something like that. Anytime we ran out of something to do, he'd find something else for us to do. Like, you're going to work so that you just, don't get into trouble while you're here, because, he had to be there till 4 or 5 o'clock that afternoon.
So you saw the work ethic ground floor your whole life.
This industry it's a working industry. You're there early, you're there late. Your schedule might say that you want to get off at 4 or 5 o'clock, and something comes up, you're there till 7, 8 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And, it's just, you got to take care of it. Even if you're running the grocery store, not even owning it, it's just all day, every day. You never know what problem's going to come up. It could be refrigeration, it could be employee, it could be something happens with a customer. Supply, anything. And so, like I said, ideally, it's like I want to leave at 5 o'clock today. But 5 o'clock comes, and sometimes 5 o'clock goes, and you're still there.
Man, that's I actually worked in the grocery business myself through high school, some little experience with some of that, but I'm sure you'll hit on there's got to be the work-life balance. I mean, with a schedule like that's not structured.
And I really think that's probably what affected my mom and dad the most. They split up early age of my brother and I was so young, it's just all I knew, that my parents were split. And it didn't happen as I was older and, affected me or anything. That was my life of it or whatever. But whenever I got into it, I could see how easy it would be to just dive in, and I just work a lot, and I don't come home, and I can't leave in time to go do this. And so
all consuming almost.
It really is. And we're fortunate in a way that the business started in 2005 whenever, I was 18 years old or so and a senior in high school. And we really got to a level whenever I had kids that, in the beginning I was working a lot. I mean, I'll get into the trajectory of the company, but now I'm at a point where I don't really have to log the hours in the facility as much as I used to. It's not that I have to be at work at 6 a.m. and I don't know what time I get to go home. I can tear the phone line up all hours of the night sometimes, but and then there's some days where it's not as bad. But there in the beginning, if I had kids whenever we were 8, 9, 10 years into it, it would have been a lot harder to have the balance.
Right.
Just because we were on such a growth trajectory that, we were working all the time. It was 6-7 days a week.
So your dad started in 2005. You were 18. What did that first store look like? Did he buy an existing store, or tell me about the
store one was in New Hebron, Mississippi. It's big booming metropolis in Lawrence County. So my dad was living in Shivers and running the grocery store in Mendenhall, Mississippi. And it was for the Vowels. It's Todd Vowell. And I was actually working at that store just as a bag boy, soccer clerk, whatever. And I remember he and I went to go look at the store in New Hebron. And we walked around and looked at it, and he said, I think I'm going to buy this. And I remember looking at him at 18, and I said, I think this is a terrible idea. And he said, if I buy this, I'm going to move you down here, and I'll give you a raise. And I remember thinking, like, I haven't had a raise. And, I've been working for this guy for my whole life, and I've never gotten a raise. I'm making minimum wage.
What is a raise, Dad?
Yeah. So he buys the store, moves me down there. I drive an extra 20 miles to get there. I get my first paycheck. I rip it open. He gave me 10 cents more an hour.
Oh.
And I knew then to ask more questions in negotiations.
So he stayed in Shivers and sent you down there to what? You just get an apartment, or
no?
How old are you? You're 18. Right?
I'm 18. I'm still a senior in high school, and so I still go to high school at Pearl and would drive back and forth. And he would go to the store in the morning time, check up, count the money and everything like that, leave the personnel in charge. I would come in the afternoon, but he would go to his job in Mendenhall to manage that store. And then when he got off of that store, 5, 6 o'clock at night, he'd go back to New Hebron and he would close. So he was, we told him it was the Superman days, whatever, but he was working from 6 a.m. to 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night sometimes. And it was 7 days a week. 7 days a week. Sunday.
Was there a conflict at the grocery store he was working at in Mendenhall, and you're trying to?
Yeah, he did call his owner and tell him what he was considering doing and everything like that, and they allowed him to do that. And I thought that was very gracious of him.
That's super gracious because
looking back on it now, like for someone that works for us to also buy another grocery store and still manage one for us would be extremely difficult to
and it's like, okay, where I'm trying to get.
Exactly.
I'm trying to get here. I'm trying, and with that, all your effort, energy, focus is on the new thing.
Exactly.
And so you're going to give up on that. Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that they allowed that is that's super gracious. And that probably is a testament to your dad's work ethic and how valuable he was to them.
I think so. And, I believe the store was very profitable with him there. And, there was a time whenever he was working for them that, they did part ways. And, but getting to the store in New Hebron, really, we bought it in the summer of 2005. And then, the store was doing $20,000 a week. And that is not a lot for the grocery business. And it wasn't a month later, Katrina hit. So we're 2-3 weeks, it was 2 weeks without power, and, another 3 weeks or so before getting like fully restocked and everything. But as soon as Katrina hit, there was this panic of we might lose everything because he didn't really have the insurance for the food coverage, food spoilage
Oh, wow.
And just the underwriting on the insurance, everything didn't cover food spoilage. So you think about everything that's cold in the grocery store, it went in the dumpster. Ice cream, meat, produce, everything, because the power was out for so long.
And so let me just inject. So whenever you're buying that product, just for our listeners to like have a better grasp of the process here, do you buy that inventory? Like you pay for the inventory and then it's yours, or do you like?
Oh no, you buy it right then. It is yours. So they give you a machine, you order it. As soon as it delivers, you paid for it. Usually, 5-7 days later, money comes out of the bank account for whatever you purchased within that week. So we owned it.
So you were all in.
It and like I said, a lot of it went straight in the dumpster. So when the power went out and when they told us that it would be 2 weeks before we get back up, the dumpster was only so big. So, people came to the store, they were hungry, they needed food or whatever. And my dad just literally gave meat out the front door so that it was either going in the dumpster or out the front door, back door, you pick. And so we gave it to these people. It was still, good and everything like that. But the people were so appreciative that he just gave them this free product. And everybody, obviously went home and had to cook it and they ate it and everything. But when we opened back up, the sales went from 20,000 a week to 40,000 a week.
Really?
It doubled. And that is really what saved us. And I think the gesture of when he gave the product away instead of throwing it away, I think some people were so appreciative and cared so much about, we'll support this store.
Right.
Because they supported us whenever, the cards are down, chips were down, we were running behind.
Right.
There wasn't a grocery store for 50 miles that was open. And, we can eat tonight because he gave us,
And it's not like he was trying to sell it for half off either.
Oh, no.
Just giving it away.
Yeah.
I mean,
we had no way to even take money. I mean, the credit card machines were down and it was just, just take it.
That's where shop local comes from.
Exactly.
Right there.
Yeah. Because, you think a corporate guy from Arkansas or somebody in Cincinnati, Ohio is going to send a message, hey, just give it out the front door,
Right. Right. No, they're not. No, not at all. Wow. So right out the gate with a black eye.
Yeah. I mean, it was a month later. So
golly.
And like I said, we really thought this was over before it really even got started.
Yeah, right.
But
what was the name of it? Oh, Sullivan's, I guess.
Yeah, it was Tri-County Grocery.
Tri-County Grocery.
And then we changed the name to Sullivan's Grocery.
Okay.
And so, I'm working for my dad, and I remember he and I had just a big spat. I mean, if you work with your family,
I have worked with my dad.
It can be tough. It can be tough sometimes. So I remember he and I had a spat one time, and he told me, just if you feel that way, you can go work somewhere else. And I said, to prove him,
headed to Miskelly's.
I went to Miskelly's, and I got a job at Miskelly's, and I had a couple friends working in the warehouse and stuff. They said they needed warehouse help, so I applied. And
how old are you?
I'm 19.
Okay.
And they put me to work at the back.
So did you go to college?
Yes, I did a little tour of the state. I went from Millsaps College my freshman year to Mississippi State for 1 year, my sophomore year, and then I went to USM for 3 years, and I graduated from USM. So my little circle of school. But so I'm a freshman in college working at Miskelly's, and just to prove him wrong. And
right.
Looking back on my time at Miskelly's and where they put me and what I did, I think that helped me so much in the company aspect later in life, because I had a front row seat to watch a company the size of Miskelly's operate, how they operate, how they deal with people, how they communicate, and how they communicate with different people. I was on that counter off the back warehouse, and so I got to watch the warehouse manager, how he talked to the guys in the warehouse. And then I was right by customer service, and I watched how they interacted with each other and a customer, and how they treated the customers and everything like that. And I also talked to the salespeople up front and how they interacted with each other and customers. And then the corporate office was off the warehouse, and I got to see they came through and how they interacted with I'm just a lowly $8 an hour employee back here, and how they interacted with me. And I remember my grandfather passed away while I was working at Miskelly's, and I never missed work. I had called and missed work for this funeral. And my boss and her boss came to the funeral or to the visitation. And I just remember looking up and being stunned that they were there. They drove an hour to come to where his visitation was. And that that left such a mark on me of how like you should treat people that work for you. And I still remember, like, you know, when they came in, they gave me a hug and everything, told me how sorry they were. And that was such a growing thing for me, because how can I use that whenever I had employees later in life? And so I try to, you know, be sympathetic to my employees if something happens, or, you know, if they have a life event, you know, I'm always there to try to support them in any way that I possibly can, because I feel like an event like that means so much to somebody, and it's so little. It's just a little bit of time that you gave, but it leaves such a mark with somebody. And an employee, they'll do anything for you after that. You know, you got them for life.
Man, that's a really good point. I agree 100%. And you know, we talk about this all the time, but time is your biggest commodity that we have. Yes. And the fact that you're willing to sacrifice your time for your employees or people that mean the most to you, you know, that goes such a long way. In the moment, to your point, in the moment, it doesn't feel like.
No, I mean, I was 19 years old.
And you're not doing it for the ROI of, you know, having an employee for life. It's just the right thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's very inspiring that at that age, at 19, working in a warehouse, that you had the mentality to be a sponge and just take in all the different interactions between different facets of the company, and then just the way people treated people. I mean, that's to be a sponge and then log that and then say, hey, I'm going to use this in the future. That's,
you know, and I didn't know at the time that I was going to
growth,
use it. You know, it was just what was going on around me and being observant to what's going on. And then looking back on it later in life, whenever I became to have a position of, you know, authority or management, and, well, how can I get this employee to do what I wanted to do?
Right. You go draw from the well from when you were at Miskelly's. Yes.
I've been in situations where the person managing me was, you know, the hand on the fist, you know, hand on the desk, just yelling. And, you know, it's like, is that really the most effective way?
Right. Right.
You know, I knew that I didn't want to do it like that, but people do it like that, and some people are very effective. And, you know, it just depends on, I guess, your audience or whatever. You can also run off good help doing stuff like that.
For sure. Absolutely. That's awesome.
To get back to the track, you know, we got to the second store was in Raleigh, Mississippi, and bought that in 2008. And at that point, my dad was still managing the grocery store in Mendenhall. And that's whenever they said, okay, this is probably going to be the line. This is the conflict.
So the first store in New Hebron, you left, went to Miskelly's. Did he just hire a general manager to fill that role while he couldn't be there? And then he still probably went at night.
And, you know, she did a decent job and everything. And it was just enough to where he would be there in the morning. He could check up, leave them a list. He'd be back there in the afternoon to close it down. So he did that for what felt like years.
So he bought in Raleigh.
Raleigh was store 2.
And did you come back in the game before or after the second purchase?
So I came back. He had purchased Raleigh in 2008, and I believe I transferred to Southern. It must have been in 2008 in the fall. And I started going to school 2 days a week and working for him 5 days a week, basically running the store in New Hebron so that he could focus on the one in Raleigh. He also recruited someone that worked with him in Mendenhall to work for him, and really that became like our first supervisor. And he also went to school at Southern with me and lived in Hattiesburg, and one went one way and one went the other. And we were young and, you know, working, going to school, and just, I mean, it was can to cane every day, it felt like.
Wow.
But when he bought the second store, that's really whenever the owner came to my dad and said, all right, you know, this is probably the line. And it's like, today's going to be your last day. And
on the spot.
And my dad called me. He's like, it's about to get real, you know, and just, he was so concerned because he had a W-2 job that paid for everything. And so whatever the company made, leaving the company, keep reinvesting in the company, and, you know, upgrade the POS system, upgrade equipment. You know, you can pay, you know, higher wages to recruit better people and offer benefits and so on and so forth. So now it's like, well, my W-2 job's gone.
Right.
And now I have to take all my money out of the company to make a living.
Right.
And I think that scared him. But I was in New Hebron when he called me and told me, like, I think I called him for a problem. And he said, I can't talk to you right now. And I was like, something going on? He said, yes. I'm being let go right now. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is great. And I'm thinking like, now we can
Right.
focus on this. He said, this is not great. I'll call you
No,
later.
not great.
And it was, I just remember walking around all day thinking like, this is going to be good. This is great. And, he called me at dark or whatever, and you could just tell like he'd been on it all day
Yeah.
and just completely stressed out. Like his life was about to change.
Right.
But, we dove in, and, we started doing good. I mean, both stores doing very well. And, he thought, well, let's keep going. Let's get another one. And so store 3 was in Forest, Mississippi, and I'm still in college. So it must've been 2010. And, my dad's telling me like, hey, you should come work with me after college. And I told him that, like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life.
So 2008 to 2010. So
Yeah.
the Great Recession.
Yeah.
Did that affect y'all?
When the economy pulls back, I think that people change their spending habits, and you might not be so inclined to go eat a steak dinner that costs $100 when you can go to the grocery store and buy a steak and cook it yourself. It might be $50.
So it helped y'all.
So people are more inclined to cook at home than go out to eat, where you obviously know it's more expensive and everything. So we felt like we did very well through the recession. It didn't negatively affect the grocery industry. Mm-hmm. So I know that it was probably tough on some other people in some other industries and stuff like that. But when times are tough, people usually stay home more.
Yeah.
Which is good for, selling groceries and everything.
Interesting. So you graduated from USM, and Dad said, come on, and you said no.
I was still in college, and my dad told me that, we should do this. And I vehemently just told him no. Like, I want to find something that's easier to do, something to make more money. I said, I don't think that this pie is big enough for me and you to split. And
one other thing too, I want your input on this real quick. Because I've dealt with this, and I feel like everybody does, just career burnout. So you've been going from can to can't since you were 18. Do you think that had anything to do with your lack of desire to jump in? Is the fact you're like, hey, I want to change up?
Yeah, I could see that. It was, like I said, can to can't. It was 5, 6, 7 days a week. Phone, the grocery store is always on. We close one day a year of Christmas, and I can leave my phone on the nightstand on Christmas Day, and usually nobody will call. But any other day, like the stores be open to 9 o'clock. You could get a call at 9 o'clock telling you like, hey, something is wrong, and what do we do? And I feel like I wanted something that, at the time, I just thought like, I want something that when 5 o'clock hits, I could punch that clock and it's done. I'll pick it back up at 8.
Right.
And now looking back, I don't think I have that mindset or that mentality. I think I would drive myself crazy from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock the next day of just, what can I do? What can I, work on or whatever.
You would probably feel lazy too.
I would. I can't sit still.
I struggle with that bad.
I can't do it. But, so we get into, I guess, the decision time or whatever. I'm in my senior year of school. I went for corporate finance. I knew I was going to be an investment banker or something like that. And I remember going to a job interview for a bank, and we had, I felt like a good interview. And at the end of the interview, she said, we would like to hire you. And I said, great. And I remember she told me that starting pay was $28,000 a year. And when she said it, I know my eyes lit up, and I just felt like all the blood just came out of my face. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, I have, a mortgage, I have a car note, I have a dog. I was like, I make more money than that right now. And the lady could tell that like I was surprised by the offer, and she said, is everything okay? And, I didn't know what to say. And I said, ma'am, I make more money than that now. And she said, what do you do? And I said, I work at a grocery store. And she said, well, maybe you ought to stick with that. And when she said it, I knew the interview was over, and I walked out. And I remember like sitting in my truck for a minute, and I was like, all right. I called my dad, and I said, hey, we need to talk. And I said, look, I'll do it, but we got to get bigger. And I was like, this, 3 stores isn't enough. What we've got so far isn't enough. We've got to do more. It's got to be bigger. It's got to be better. And I said, no, I'll do it. And he said, okay. And so it's 2011. We have 3 stores. My brother started working for us too at the time. We graduated college at the same time, and he's a year older than I am. So we both graduated and got out of 2011. So we started on a scorched earth tour. We were going to buy some grocery stores. Like if you offered it to us, we were going to buy it. So 2012, we bought a store in Bude, Mississippi, and that's Franklin County. When they called us and told us to go look at it, I just threw my hands up at my dad. I said, no. And I was like,
how are you finding these deals? Is it like a grocery,
so usually
Facebook ain't really going on probably.
It's not marketplace or anything like that. But usually the wholesaler that we buy all of our groceries from, if a retailer wants to get out, they'll tell the wholesaler first. Wholesaler will then try to find a suitor, depending on location, the type of store, volume, and things like that, like who's growing, who wants to buy a store and everything. And they're trying to find somebody that they supply to buy the store so they can continue selling groceries.
Yeah. Right.
So our wholesaler called us and told us about the store in Bude. And I was like, man, we won't, we're trying to get bigger, better. And I was like, I don't want to go to Bude. And so we drove all the way over there. It took us about 2 months, and the guy said, just go look at it. Just go look at it. So we get over there and look at it, and, it's a similar size to New Hebron. And store's dirty, the equipment was old, and I just shook my head and I said, this is not the next step up, I thought.
Right.
So I said, let's go look at the competition. So we go to the next town over, it's Meadville. I mean, they're right there joined together, just split between 84, and couldn't find a grocery store. And so we stop at the gas station, like, where's the grocery store? And it's like, there's only one, it's right over there. And then we kind of sat in the car and, we're trying to find, like, where's the next one? And then we realized this is the only grocery store in the entire county. And so we were at that gas station. I said, why don't you call them and tell them about it? And I said, the only grocery store in the whole county, you can't mess that up.
Right.
And so, 30 days later, we own a store in Bude and instantly gutted it and started remodeling it and everything. But it's been a great store for us since. So 2012, we buy the one in Bude. We kind of stalled for a couple of years. In 2015, we bought 4 stores. 2017, we bought 5 stores in 3 states. And then 18, we bought 1. 19, we bought 1. And
how are you managing all this stuff?
It was a lot coming very, very fast. I mean, and there's no manual of how to, run a grocery corporation or, how to grow one. You figure it out from, just trials and tribulations. And we stubbed our toe a lot, and we messed up a lot. We bought things that we shouldn't have, and we thought we could do anything. We thought we could fix anything. It's a bad store, we can fix it. We can do this, and it'll be better. And
so, a lot of your acquisitions, did the labor stay on?
Yes. So we tried to hire every bit of the labor that was in there. Now, there's a mindset of some of the people that, or any grocery store that we've ever purchased, that this is the way we do things. And we tell them, like, this is the way we do things, and if there's too big of a conflict, usually there is some turnover. But we try to hold on to everybody that wants to do it our way. And, most of the time tell people, like, the guy sold it because you weren't making money. Right. So this is the way that we do it, and we know that we can make money doing it like this. And, if stores making money, everybody's happy. We're happy. And I would think a lot
of people, especially if you're going in and doing a facelift like that would actually, I would think, rejuvenate the workplace excitement there.
Helps with morale and everything. But, and if a store is profitable, it helps everybody in the store. We're happy. The employees that are in there are happy because you can start giving out some raises or bonuses. You can reinvest in the store to make it a nicer facility. The customers like it whenever a store is profitable because it's a nicer store to shop at. Mm-hmm. If you have a store that's not making any money, do you think the owner is reinvesting into it to give you some new equipment or new registers? We're reinvesting the money based off of the profitability of the facility. So, a profitable store is better for the community than, one that the employees are, stealing stuff out the back door or, not happy to be there or something like that. It just causes a negative drag on the business and the, in the community.
Right. So all right, how many stores are you up to now? That's 2015?
So, so we, in 2015, we bought 2 stores in Hattiesburg in January, and then we crossed the state lines in November and bought a store in Clinton, Louisiana and Amite, Louisiana. So that really stretched us. I mean, I'm living in Hattiesburg at the time. We were driving every day, it felt like, to Clinton and Amite because those were bigger stores doing more volume in Louisiana, and that was such a learning curve to go into a different state. There's so many more regulations and things like that, permitting and, alcohol and things like that in Louisiana that Mississippi doesn't have those speed bumps. And we stubbed our toe in Louisiana, and we learned some valuable lessons in those 2 stores. But, we came out a lot stronger and thought, we could do this again.
Right.
And, a deal came to us to buy 5 stores, and it was Kenwood, Louisiana, Monroe, Louisiana, Vicksburg, Mississippi, Ruleville, Mississippi, and Lake Village, Arkansas. So that was 5 stores at one time, 3 different states.
Was that a retirement deal or something?
Yeah.
Getting out of the game?
It was 4 brothers, and they were retiring. So they had, I think, a total of 10 or 12, but we bought, things that were kind of shifted our direction. And they had a lot more that was in Louisiana down.
Is there
20.
a broker involved in any capacity on these transactions, or attorneys, or
definitely attorneys? But all these were warehouse brokered, so didn't have to pay like a commission fee or something like that. Now, bigger corporations will hire a brokerage firm to sell their corporation.
Yeah.
But none of these had a broker representing them. So
it seems like that would be very, very detailed. I mean, just with all the inventory plus asset plus.
It was a ton of inventory. So
has there ever been an acquisition where they did not actually own the asset that they is there such a thing where grocery store owners don't own the building?
Yes.
They just
so
lease it?
out of our 9, we're leasing 2.
Really?
Yes. And the others that we do own as a family grocery company or whatever. But it's a mixed bag on whether if you want to own the real estate or not. If you're in a high growth trajectory, it's actually better to lease because you can hold on to more cash and you're not putting 20% down on a building and things like that. But long term, we wanted the asset. Mm-hmm. And there's so many tax advantages with the asset and things like that you don't get from leasing. I mean, the rent payment's 100%, a write-off, but you've got so many things that you can do in the building that help out with taxes.
Right.
So we would prefer to own it, but if it's a good enough facility or something, we're not opposed to leasing.
How long are your lease terms?
So you definitely want site control for at least 10 years when you go into one. And so that's not to say that, when we bought the one in Monroe, there was an option at 3 years, but, we had site control for up to 15 years, I believe, whenever we bought the building or bought the business and started operating the grocery store.
Yeah.
But, like I said, we stubbed our toe along the way. Monroe was one of them. It was a tough store. It was 2 hours from home base, and 2 hours over there, 2 hours back. We converted it from a conventional store to a cost plus store, which is a lower margin store, and sales were through the roof, and we couldn't make any money. It was just we had the margin compression low enough to boost sales, but that didn't offset the fixed expenses and things like that. So, we're going over there and working our tails off. And then, you get a financial back and you shake your head. It's like, guys, we're not making anything.
Right.
And then you start realizing like the rest of the company's suffering because you've got so much focus going on over here that it's like, all right, we got to stop giving this so much focus because we're losing back at home base. And so then we start taking our eye off the ball over here and sales start to dip. And do we go over there and save it and, risk the other, 14, 15 stores? And we just finally had to say, we're just going to have to get to the option, and we closed it.
Wow.
So it was a tough decision, but it was the right decision. And we were stronger after it. But we closed that store, pulled our circle in some. And then since then, we really focused on, what are we good at? What are we not good at? And if we're not good at it and it's not making money, then we need to just start cutting it off. And so
you hit the peak of how many stores?
16.
16 stores at what year?
In 2019, we had 16 stores.
2019, 16 stores. COVID hits March of 2020.
That was a wild time.
I've got to assume that affected you.
That was probably the most stressful moment in my life, I would say. I have a daughter. In 2020, she was 3. My wife is pregnant, and we had a son born that summer of 2020, and the company is on fire. I mean, just everywhere you look, there are problems. You know,
Not a good way on fire.
yeah, I mean, we were busy, which was good, but it was overwhelming in every direction. And, you know, restaurants were closing, and so people have to eat. So it shifted people back to the grocery store. You know, there was a time, and it might have been 2016, 2017, where restaurants were doing more business than the grocery stores. That was the first time that it flopped and it shifted. People were eating out more than they were buying groceries and eating at home.
What was your dad's temperament when COVID hit? He's like, son, I went through Katrina. This ain't nothing.
Hey, we were all overwhelmed. I mean, the phone would start at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you did not know what the problem would be. The problem could be, you know, everybody in the meat market walked out just because they're overworked. You know, it could be managers got COVID. There's nobody here to run the store. It could be, you know, getting groceries was a hard problem.
That's what the supply chain
was just completely disrupted. And so when you aren't dealing with employee issues of who's sick, who can be at work, do we have the coverage, just keep hiring. We would hire anybody that came in and like, yes, put them to work. And okay, I think that fire's out. Let's start trying to buy whatever we can get our hands on. So whether meat, you know, stuff directly from the manufacturers, we're trying to buy, you know, paper straight from, you know, P&G and Fiora and whatever we could do just to get paper in the building. It didn't matter what it cost, where it came from. So we're buying 18-wheelers just straight from the manufacturer and distributing it out ourselves. And, you know, cereal, you know, crackers, anything that we get our hands on, we would buy because we were so busy, just put it out. People need it, just put it out. They'll buy it.
Right.
And, you know, it was a wild time. We were busy. It was a lot going on. And it was like, when is this going
Madness
to break?
Stop. Yeah.
You know, when is this going to shift back to some version of, you know, normal? And I think it finally got into 2021 when, you know, restaurants started opening back up and people weren't, I guess, as nervous or scared about the situation, or, you know, some people had it and they were, you know, felt like they were immune to it, or the vaccines came out and people just felt more comfortable and things did subside a bit. And, you know, it was fine with us. We needed a breath. And,
Right.
you know, just felt like it was just months and months of just getting your face pounded in to
Right.
finally being able to take a breath. And you could feel like the tension come out of your chest and your shoulders,
Right.
like, okay, we're going to make it, you know. But it was a wild time. And it was a daily struggle of what is going to get thrown at us today. And you, like I said, you just wouldn't know. And,
Yeah.
you know, we have a great supervisor staff, and they just run the roads and make sure they hold consistencies in the store and everything like that. And it's like every day, 6 o'clock, they would kind of, you know, which direction do I head so that I can help this store, this, you know, meat market, this produce department or whatever, so that, you know, they can try to get a job done. And it was 7 days a week. It was from 6 o'clock to who knows when.
Right.
And just trying to get through each and every day.
Yeah.
It was on fire for months.
So y'all hit the peak as far as number of stores, and then so you start to trim the fat, get your circle smaller.
Yep.
So it wasn't too long ago y'all built the one in Gluckstadt.
That's right.
And so that's a whole nother ball of wax of developing.
Yes.
I mean, because I'm assuming you had to go. I mean, the building process is way more involved than people ever think. I mean, just from utilities to, I don't remember your process if it was rezoning or anything like that, but you know, you got to go through board approvals with the city and all that. Like
Luckily,
on top of running all these other stores and I mean all the problems with that, this is a whole new set of problems. How do you juggle that?
I was going to say, luckily, the county loves a grocery store, so if, you know, that goes up for approval. I think they, you know, we put our little board up there, and 2 minutes later they said, you know, how do we vote on it? And
Their stomach started growling. They're like,
all the
come
way
on.
across. It's like, yeah, y'all get started. But yeah, I think building a grocery store probably took a couple of years off my life from how stressful it was. You know, anybody that's built a house, just imagine, you know, if your house was, you know, 2,500, 3,500 square feet, how stressful that was. Just imagine building 35,000 square foot of house. That's essentially what it feels like. I've never built a house, but I've built a 35,000 square foot house. That's what I tell people. So it is so involved and so intricate that you have to put yourself in the shoes of a shopper or an employee throughout the entire building. So it's like when I come in, what will I see? Do I want to go left? Do I want to go right? It's like, well, where are the cars going to be parked at? So we're going to go left because the majority of people will be on this side. So if they turn left, what are they going to look at? And, everything that, people take for granted in the store, it's like, oh, I just go in. We spent hours talking about each and every piece of equipment and where it would be turned a little bit or what would be on this wall so that it would, I like the produce department because it's so colorful and people buy produce with their eyes. So you turn, you look at produce, and then you just see colors looking back at you. It's like, oh, this is nice. It's fresh. But you want to smell the deli and what they're cooking and everything like that as soon as you hit the door. So as soon as you walk in, it's like, well, they got, fried chicken back there, cinnamon rolls back there. It smells good in here. And you can see all the colors from produce. It looks fresh in here. And so you've made it 10, steps in the building, and I've made you buy a cinnamon roll and a bouquet of flowers, and that wasn't on your list.
Right.
So,
yeah.
That is the goal or
that's
whatever.
very, very intriguing, man. But it makes perfect sense because it's like if you put the brownies in the front and then the lettuce behind it, you're not gonna buy it.
Exactly. So, where everything is placed in the store was all done on the computer before it ever came to fruition. And just the continued walk of like, when you get to this point, what are you going to be looking at? It's like, this will be the meat case, service case, smoked meat case, and, just all the bins of it and everything. So a grocery store usually has 4 corners, just 4 hard corners. And most people will not shop the corner. So if you go to Gluckstadt, you can kind of tell that the corner in the meat market's rounded out as almost like if you start here, you're going to round out the entire case to get through it. Whereas if we did a hard corner right there, your eyes don't go to the corner. Your eyes are like, oh, well, there's the beef over there. There's the chicken over there. You completely missed whatever's in this corner, if it's pork or sandwich meat or something like that. Yeah. So if you round the corner out, once you started, you're just going to continue on through the whole track. Corner.
Man, I never would have even thought that.
Yeah, and most people don't. They just subconsciously will do the whole corner or whatever.
And that's probably back to, drawing from the well of the Muskellies, just you paying attention. Just the minor details like that are going to change the bottom line.
Grocery stores that we walked through to get the concept that went into Gluckstadt. We went into I know the exact grocery store where I saw where they rounded out the meat market, and it was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And it was in a high-end store. We walked through it, and we pulled pieces out of, dozens of grocery stores to say, this is how we're going to do the produce case. This is how we're going to do the market. This is how we're going to shape the deli. And, we were at the store in Baton Rouge, and I said, we should do the market like that, because when you stand right here, the entire market is looking back at you. Whereas if it's just a long, straight wall, if you stand right here, you can see what's straight in front of you. Mm-hmm. But as the cases all bend and almost make like a semicircle, if you stand in a specific spot, the entire meat market is looking back at you. And
that's so interesting.
Colorful, it's red, it's fresh.
So now you got me wondering what kind of music you're playing in there.
It's to kind of make you buy more groceries.
So Gluckstadt's been, that's an incredible facility. Y'all did an excellent job on that. And that's so cool to know all the intel on that. You got something else in the works too, don't you?
We do. So I think that some people just really can't cut it off. I think that some people just as soon as something is good and done, like, if we could coast on the success of something like Gluckstadt for a really long time and just, I'm going to ride this coattail until I retire. And I remember distinctly after we built Gluckstadt, I was like, I'll never do that again. I'll never do it again. And we're doing it again. So, we broke ground in Brandon, Mississippi a few weeks ago, and we're planning on doing a very similar concept of Gluckstadt. It'd be shaped a little bit different. We moved a few things in there, and so it'd be about 35,000 square foot grocery store and 25,000 square foot of adjacent retail space. It's a whole 9.5 acre development. So
it's a grocery store plus retail space.
Yes. So it is a ton of square footage. And
wow.
Even 2 out parcels. So it's
really?
There would be a lot.
So you're a real estate developer.
We are now.
That's awesome. When is it going to be ready?
So we're hoping for 12 months. We're on dirt work now, so really weather pending. So if weather cooperates with us, then if we can get a little ahead on it, then that'll be good. So we're really thinking 12 months we'll be selling some groceries in Brandon.
On Gluckstadt, how long did it take?
Gosh, that was we opened in April of 2020. 2022. We started the project in 2020. I think the first site visit was in January of 2020, before COVID even hit. And so it took from, start to finish. It was a little over 2 years, but we built, right in the height of COVID.
Right.
And so again, it was, how do we acquire steel and concrete, and is this going to stay on budget?
Right.
Because prices were just so volatile during that time. It's like we really got to nail this stuff down, because we were so nervous spending that amount of money that if we go over a little bit, can we afford to sell groceries and even make any money? And Gluckstadt has been very fortunate, and the sales that it's doing in the community really accepts that store and supports that store. So we had some cost overrun, but we've been able to overcome it, and the store does extremely well.
So when you finish branding, how many will that give you in your portfolio?
And that'll be 10.
10.
Lucky 10. So
you gonna stop at branding?
I like to say yes, but we've already been looking at some other opportunities after Brandon. I think we have a concept in Gluckstadt that works really well, and that other municipalities won't. And so we've had other municipalities come to us and it's like, we want your store in this town, in this area. What can we do? And so we've looked at some other things. Our first priority is Brandon. We got to get Brandon up, going, profitable, right, and secured before we can really seriously entertain something else. But I would say that it'd be tough to turn it off and say that we're not going to do anything else. So I just feel like that if we keep pushing like this or whatever, then there'll be a time when we finally say, all right, enough's enough. But I don't know if Brandon's going to be where we say that enough is enough. But
man, that is such an awesome story, and just hearing the way that y'all hacked through it. I mean, that is, people don't realize it, because we talked before we started getting going. We were just talking about the whole it must be nice crowd, and it's people have no idea
how hard this business is and this industry is. Anybody that has no experience whatsoever and says, I think I want to open up a grocery store, it's like, you cannot come up with a faster way to lose a pile of money, because you don't understand how tight the margins are and how specific the numbers have to be to just leave a little bit left at the end of the day for you to make some money. And if you go to the grocery store and you spend $100, I didn't make $100. $75 goes straight back to filling the shelves up. That leaves me $25 that I got to pay everything with. $10 goes to the employees. 3% goes to work comp and benefits. You got another $2 going to utilities. You got another $1 going to insurance. You've got accounting. You've got interest carry. You've got rent or a bank note for the building. Just all these expenses, supplies that come out. People don't realize that at the end of the day, your $100, if I did everything right, I might get to keep 3 of it. Wow. And you have to do that based off of volume. You hope that you have enough volume that it pushes fixed expenses down enough that you can hold on to $3 out of the 100. So payroll is supposed to be $10. If you overspend on payroll by $2, you got $1 left. It is so fixed on the numbers that you can have to have anything left. If you deviate a little bit along the way, there's nothing left, or it's negative.
Or it sounds to me comparable to the farming industry. You do everything right. You're super analytical. You just do all your due diligence, and you plant, and you do everything that you can do the best way you can do it. And then a curveball comes out of left field, COVID, or Great Recession, or supply chain issue, whatever.
Or let a thunderstorm come through and a tornado knock a power line out a quarter mile up the road. If we don't have power, we've got $250,000 worth of inventory that needs to stay cold. What do we do? So the clock starts. As soon as the power goes out, the clock starts. And then you have just a limited amount of time. It's like, all right, the ice cream's gone. You got to throw the ice cream away. Next thing is going to go is start getting into the milk and the, sour cream and things like that, meat department. You're going to just start, you can, in a few hours, start losing serious money to the dumpster because of a thunderstorm that happened that knocked the power out, a power line down a quarter mile up the road. The building can be perfectly fine, but the clock is starting and you're just tapping your foot like, how much is this going to cost? And then, like I said, you had $3 that you made off this person. It's not $3 anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So
And the guy that's like, must be nice. Like,
must be
come
nice.
on,
Yeah.
come ride with me.
I bet you slept good last night during that thunderstorm, you know.
Exactly. Well, Parker, I know we're getting close on time. Let's see. I was trying to think of something funny or cool to ask you. My mind's going right now to your pantry at your house and your refrigerator. How many refrigerators do you have at your house, and what's your pantry look like? Because I know that joker's got to be big.
You know, everybody always thinks that you have a ton of groceries at the house if you own a grocery store, and that's not true. And one, I pay for my groceries just like anybody else. So there's no free groceries at my house. But
that was going to be my next question. So you shop at Sullivan's?
Yes, and so you have to pay for it too. And I lead by example. So if I got to pay for it, I think you should too.
Right.
I will say that if I'm at work and my wife says you should get some stuff, then
I bet that happens a lot.
Okay, I'm going to be here another hour. You know, because once I start to grab a couple things, it's like you make it through produce, you start talking to the produce manager or the clerk or something like that, and it's like, oh, the department looks good.
Well, you're looking at things from a business perspective while you're
so I've
shopping. You're not just running and grabbing and checking off
I
a
grab a
grocery
couple
list.
things, and it's like, hey, you know, can you clean this up over here? You need to call this item. You know, department looks good. Yeah, everybody show up today. Like, how's labor and everything like that? You know, truck was busy. You got it working on your order. Then you move to the deli, and then it's like I had to tell you this problem. Come back here and look at this sink. It's leaking a little bit. So all of a sudden you put my stuff down. I'm in the deli. Then you go back to the market, and it's like, hey, you know, we got this sale coming up this weekend. You know, we need some space in the freezer. And so you spent 10 minutes back there with him. You know, wife's like, well, when are you coming home? You know, it's like, well, I've made it to the dairy. So, you know, if she texts me a list of 5 or 6 things to get, I tell her, all right, it's going to take an hour. Or more.
Who knows?
You know,
just depends on, you know, I deal with the same stuff as far as curveballs. You wake up, you think you may have your day planned out, and then it's just, you know, a lot of industries are like that. But man, that is, I really appreciate you taking the time to just paint the picture for us how involved that is, because you literally have to be in tune with every facet of the business. I mean, from produce to the meat market to dry goods, perishables, whatever, but from the business side, you have to understand bank interest and notes and leases and the permitting process. I can only imagine how intensive the permitting process is from USDA or whatever, you know.
And it's on all the time. You know, it's not, you know, a business that shuts down at 5 o'clock and I'll pick you back up at 8 a.m. You know, it is always on. Even when it's closed, it's on. You know, you get a thunderstorm that comes through in the middle of the night or whatever, you're kind of watching the map, just worried, like, I need to check on that store in the morning or whatever, and see if, you know, the power went out or anything like that. So it is always on, and it's, you know, it's always calling. It's always, you know, information that you're having to look at, dissect to make sure that the numbers are going right, sales are going right, people are, you know, going right. So, you know, we have 500 employees. And
500?
500. And that's 500 people that depend on us to operate a business so that they can get a paycheck and live their life. You know, they depend on us. And if we ran a bad company, that's 500 people that wouldn't know if they'll have a job the next day. So, you know, we take what we do very seriously, and you know, it's like I said, it's on all the time.
Well, I think y'all do a really, really good job. You're a really good representation of the industry for sure. My last question is going to be your kids. When they're going to start working in the grocery store?
You know, I look back at my decision or whatever, and I wonder, like, do you kids want to find something different to do, something easier to do? So, you know, my son's 4 and my daughter's 7. They got a little runway before they'll have to, you know, start stocking shelves and flipping donuts. But, you know,
I feel like that's such a really good industry to learn the work ethic, though.
You know, most people, when you talk to them, it's like their first job was the grocery store, you know, in their local community. The grocery store is, you know, in smaller towns, it's the heartbeat of the community. It's like, everybody uses that. And so, you know, kids in high school, you know, if they need a job, you know, we're always hiring kids in the afternoon for the afternoon shift and stuff. And that's a good place to learn the things of, like, I need to get to work on time. I need to, you know, get a paycheck. I need to learn how to take some constructive criticism from somebody. You know, I feel like some people today, as soon as you tell them, like, this isn't the way we do this, just shut down. And, you know, I think that a job really helps you to see different ways of people interacting with each other and learn from it and be able to take some criticism or even some praise. And, you know, not everybody gets a gold trophy at the end of the day. But, you know, if you do a good job, I think it's it's easy to stand out in today's times in my mind. And if you work hard, head down, work hard, you get noticed so easily. And especially in our industry of, you don't have to have a college education to make it to the top of a grocery store and be a grocery store manager or meat market manager, or even a supervisor. And I think if you've got the work ethic and I can be on time, not miss work, and, I can work harder than the guy next to me, you stand out so easily.
Yeah.
And we constantly are looking for people like that so that we can just keep bringing them along.
Yeah,
it's like if you find them, it's like, we got to keep this person.
Yeah.
Give them a raise, give them some more responsibility, show them how to do some more stuff, keep bringing them along. And, look up in a couple of years, they're running a grocery store.
Right.
Man,
I look back at my time when I worked in the grocery store. I worked for Brookshire's, and just looking back, just this whole story has kind of brought that back up in my mind, and just the valuable things that I learned from that. I was a cashier, did cashier. I worked in. I ended up doing perishables in the cooler or whatever back there, doing milk and all that stuff. And I'd work. A lot of my shifts were like 4 to 10 during the week during high school. And would just try to. I actually was in DECA program in school, and so I had to have minimum 20 hours a week. So, but just looking back through that, man, there's so many things I learned, and I still. It's just as simple of like knowing where things are in the grocery store. Like a lot of that stuff is set up similar. And that's been looking back on that. I think that's a great job, entry-level job, or, a career, like you're saying. You're a proof of concept of
if you want it
can be very rewarding, but you're going to have to sow the seed. It's not going to come to you, and just grind. And
and like I said, there's not a manual for operating and growing a grocery industry, a grocery company or whatever. I think that a lot of it was trial and error. There was a lot of error along the way, and we've been fortunate that there hasn't been a single error that was big enough that took the whole company down.
Right.
But we definitely work hard, and it's something that you're always striving to keep moving forward and the next thing, and keep growing, but grow in the right way. Like I said, there was a time whenever we would take any opportunity that came. Now we're a lot more selective, and we know what we're good at.
Right.
I know what we're not good at, and if we elect to do something, it's because we know that we'll be successful at it.
Yeah. Well, man, thank you so much, Parker, and wish you all the best with the Brandon store and the future of Sullivan's Grocery.
All right.
So, thank you.